Hi, my name's Pete, and I'm a very grateful, recovering everything. I've been sober for 14 months and maybe 2 weeks or something. I guess the journey started when I was probably 14 or 15. Smoking pot with the so-called bad kids in the neighborhood. Occasionally drinking, but I enjoyed pot more. And but I do remember the first time I took a drink or had something to drink, and that was in my friend's basement. His parents weren't home, and I think it was a Friday or Saturday night, and somebody had a bottle of peppermint schnapps. And I remember that moment that I felt great. I felt invincible. But it wasn't I guess it was a big deal because I can remember it today. Obviously, whatever amount, 35 years later. But yeah, it seemed like no matter what, whether I was in grade school, junior high, high school, there was always a element of, I liked excitement. I liked, I guess, doing things that weren't considered to be normal. So I kind of I went from being an athlete, basketball player, baseball player, all around, just normal kid stuff in, normal suburban town, all-American city growing up, to running around and probably getting in a lot of mischief or trouble. And somewhere around, I guess I was probably a sophomore in high school, smoking pot and hanging out with the wrong crowd, I guess you would say, in the 70s. Turned into my parents taking me to a place called Ridgeway, unbeknownst to me, and getting locked up for 3 months. And I came home, and that lasted about 3 months. And the second time, I was run away for a couple of weeks, which I remember vividly, being terrifying. But ended up back at Ridgeway, but this time only for like a month. And I think I was 17 at that time. Somehow managed to get through high school, parties on the weekend, drinking beer, smoking pot, which turned into hash, acid, which everything was really cool and exciting to me. I didn't think about the dangers or the stuff that they had told you in school, which was, oh, you'll have a freak out or it'll mess you up or whatever. And we just partied on. It wasn't, like there was any malice or we wanted to hurt anybody. It was just how it was where I grew up. And it was a blast. I'm not going to lie. I had a great time. There was some very strange things that happened, and probably lucky didn't get killed, in a car accident or something like that. But somehow managed to get through. And my father got really sick when I was 18. And between getting in a little bit of trouble and not being a very good student, or having very good grades, I should say, my dad talked me into going to the Airforce. And I figured back then, when I get in the Airforce, I'll settle down and I'll see the world. And, well, I ended up getting a assignment to go to Patrick Air Force Base in Cocoa Beach and work on jet fighters. And the party was on. My friends from Chicago came down, had a place on the beach, which the Air Force paid for, and it was game on. And I would stay out till 4 or 5 in the morning and somehow show up and put an oxygen mask on and a frozen Mr. Pibb. And, it started on Tuesday night and rock and rolled through Sunday night, sometimes into Monday morning. Well, sure enough, I started getting, in trouble for my hair being too long, or little infractions, and somehow I skated through, and then finally after about 20 or 30 write-ups for various airman was my name, and airman was constantly in with the commander, and Finally he said, you don't want to be here. And I said, not really. And he said, yeah, you're not really Air Force material. He says, we're going to give you an honorable discharge and we're going to part friends. I says, thank you. So I packed up Cocoa Beach, disappeared, didn't tell anybody in Cocoa Beach, went to the airport and left. Got to California, and the same thing. Rock and roll, riding motorcycles in LA, painting houses, painting commercial buildings, just kind of getting by, drifting through, having a blast, living in Malibu, living in Hollywood, and but the main focus was partying. I used to say I was a part-time painter and a full-time drinker. And it was funny at the time, but the sad truth was it was true. And I remember going down to the liquor store on the corner in South Pasadena and telling the guy behind the counter, oh, what's that up there? And he would turn around and I'd grab a bottle of whiskey or something and stuff it in my jacket. And that's, I thought that was funny or cute or whatever, but looking back at it, we didn't have enough money to drink the stuff we wanted to, so I'd just go steal it. Left LA, came back to Chicago, and got an apartment in Lakeview. And of course, the first job that came along was working at a very popular bar in Lakeview. 5 nights a week, 4 on Tuesday through Friday, and Saturday was 5 in the morning. And I remember walking home, and we could drink, do whatever. There was a Coke dealer on speed dial, and he would show up at the bar, and 2-3 nights a week doing a little bit of blow, drinking whatever we wanted, making a bunch of money, and just digging deeper and deeper. And that was a year straight of 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes later, sun up obviously, walking home, and I'd see these people jogging down the street, all healthy with their babies and their dogs, and I was dying. Just get me home. So that eventually, the madness had to stop, and I ended up going out for lunch with a friend and drank. It was summertime, drank a bunch of Weiss beers at lunch and had to be at Yoxie's at the bar at 8 o'clock, and we stayed out all afternoon drinking. I showed up at work smashed, but it didn't really matter there. I thought I could pull it off. And it was a hot summer night, sometime around midnight, 1 in the morning. Some people started fighting. I came out from behind the bar, stepped on a beer bottle as a girl jumped on my back and broke my leg in 3 places and separated my foot from my ankle, and continued to work until 5 in the morning. You could hear it pop like firecrackers, and I couldn't stand on it, but I stayed. Well, ended up having surgery, a couple of screws put in my leg. I was down for a while, and another drunken, probably wouldn't have happened if I wasn't smashed, and I would have gone to the hospital right away. Instead, I waited 3 days until my foot was so swollen, black and blue, that my toes cracked open and were bleeding, and finally went to the hospital. The baffling part of the cunning, baffling, and powerful was I always was successful at whatever I did. Whether it was bartending or later in life, I owned a couple of bars, and they were moderately to successful. And the money always flowed in, and I always made it. I wasn't one of those guys that missed work. I worked hard. I wanted to have things, nice things, and I had a lot of, without sounding like a name dropper, a lot of celebrity clientele in the car business from the bar, from working at Harry Carey's and knowing a lot of people in the city, and a lot of connections. So wherever I went, I felt special. And the alcohol, let's just say downtown Chicago, I called it my tour. And if the valet at the Ritz-Carlton knew me, the valet at the Four Seasons knew me, everybody knew me, and they'd leave my car in front, and I always drove luxury sports cars, and it was a great time. even though there was something really missing and there was something very empty and there was lots of nights of leaving the car, somehow I never got a DUI, and I managed to weave in and out of any kind of legal problems from drinking. And I guess it was in the early 2000s, the real estate market in Chicago, like everywhere else, became extremely hot. And because of the people that I knew and the amount of, I had very good credit, I was able to not only be in the luxury car business, but be very successful in the real estate game. And it was basically buying and selling properties for myself. Sometime around 2004, a young lady walked into my life and things were going extremely well. And she was the best thing that ever happened to me. And we were, shortly thereafter, we married and got the big house and had a wonderful family, her family, and got married in Barbados and the U.S. Embassy residence, and it was this fairy tale wedding, and that was all drinking. Her parents came down to Barbados and our friends, and it was everything revolved around whether it was beers on the beach or scotch at noon with my father-in-law or rum punches on the boat. It really didn't matter. And whether it was in the neighborhood with our neighbors, and I was entertaining and cooking because I love to cook and love to entertain, and it was another reason to drink. If I had a lot of people over to the house or went to the neighbor's house, it's, you know, the underlying theme was a lot of wine, a lot of booze, a lot of fun. Somewhere around, I had bought with the help of family, we had bought a national or a regional brand food company and had a couple of years of really good success, and it was really exciting and fun. Had the freedom, and I finally felt like I had made it, where I was very good at it and I enjoyed it, and some unforeseen circumstances forced us to shut the business down. And I remember how shattered I was, and it was easy to stay home, be in the backyard. I was talking to a lot of lawyers, trying to put out the fires, trying to keep things going. And it just felt like the harder I ran, the further away it got from me. And so 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock would roll around, and the beers would come out, or the wine would come out, or we'd go away to Florida or go to Michigan. And I just remember whiskey and ginger ales and how good it made me feel. And it was that next level from the beer, and the beer started becoming like 1 or 2 beers, and I felt full, and I wasn't getting that kick. I wasn't getting the high. My wonderful wife, a couple summers ago, said, I think I might want to get separated, or we should get separated. And I sobered up for a couple of weeks, and you know, everything was okay for a little while, and then I didn't know this, but once you've become an alcoholic, the saying is you can turn a cucumber into a pickle, but you cannot turn a pickle back into a cucumber. So those few weeks of sobriety, and I was uneasy, and the fears, the thing about alcoholism or addiction is the fear. You find out that you're a very fear-based person, and you try and control the future, and you try and control the situations around you, and they just get so far out of control if you can't stay sober, or you don't have the support system of a program. And I didn't know any of this. You'll just fall back on your face in a short amount of time. 1 beer, oh, I think I can have 1 beer. And that's how it started again. And 1 beer turned into the same old thing, but it got worse. Drinking, sadness, waking up sick. And one day I walked down the stairs and my wife said, I think we should get divorced. And the world stopped, and I knew she wasn't playing, and she was my everything. We had a talk that following Sunday night, and she reminded me of about 20 things that I had done. I couldn't hear anymore. I just cried and sobbed and sobbed. I was just sick. I wasn't eating. I was shaking. I was cold. I was sweating. I couldn't sleep. And I called my friend and went to his house. He lived around the corner, and he said, Pete, I think you need to go to AA. And it was one of the most painful things I ever heard, because I thought that AA was for losers. And I thought, well, I'll wait a little while longer. And he speed dialed on his iPhone, Chicago AA. And I was horrified. And I was sick, and I was thirsty. I just was dehydrated and shaking, and my wife was leaving me, and I had no money, and all the wonderful things that we had acquired, and material things, and loving things, and the dog, and my family, and it was all, you could just feel it just ripping apart. And somehow my friend and I made it to this AA meeting, and I wanted to run so bad. I would find the down and dirtiest blues bar on the south side of Chicago at 2 o'clock in the morning, where, you know, I felt safe for some insane reason, but I was deathly afraid to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't know much about it. And we walked in this room, and my friend stayed with me. And I remember these people, their concern for me and how much they cared, like they knew me my whole life, and hugging me and saying, it's going to be okay, just get to another meeting, you got to come back. And I remember they said, meeting makers make it. And I had to believe in something. Something's got to give. And I'm a person of action, and a person of, I figure, well, I've tried everything else, and I've been drinking for 35 years and weaved in and out of all the madness and the laying in bed in the morning and saying, God, if I get through this, I'll never drink again, or I'll never do coke again, or I'll never do that again, whatever the drill was. And now it was here finally, and I had no clue how to look at the world without that crutch or that shot of courage. And day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, sometimes I was able to lean on some very good friends in a time of crisis. And I would just cry and cry in private and in front of people sometimes. And I didn't care anymore. And I started dropping a lot of weight fast, because I was just so saturated with wine and rich food. And I thought the excess was always best. With this disease, you know, you find out that 1's not enough and 10's not enough. Not enough cars, not enough houses, not enough boats, not enough snowmobiles. It's always something more. And what I realized during that time was I had everything. It was right in front of me, and it wasn't enough. I would sit on my porch, and my wife wanted nothing to do with me, and she was angry, and she wasn't coming home. She came home, but she was going out with friends to stay away from me. And the more I tried, the more she hated me, so that was very difficult. And I would just go to 3 meetings a day when I could, 2 meetings for sure. They say 90 meetings in 90 days. And I thought, 90 meetings? How am I going to do that? Are you nuts? And it came and it went. And in those 90 days, my wife served me with papers very kindly, the way she did it. And we had to sell our home. I had no idea where I was going to go, and there was some bump and grind. And some of the most painful, scary times of my life, and I've had a few, and by far the most heart-wrenching, sad times. And one day when I thought I couldn't hang on anymore, I remember I had flip-flops and some baggy shorts that didn't fit me, and maybe a t-shirt, and I wandered across the street to the church. Something just pulled me to this church. And it's an old church from the late 1800s, and I laid in the back on this bench and looked up into this old oak tree and just said, God, please help me. I don't know what I'm going to do. And this breeze came along, and the leaves in the tree were shining, and I just felt this warmth, and it's going to be okay, Pete. You know, and it was just day by day by day by day. There were good days and bad. It could go from 1 minute I felt confident things were going to be okay, to these feelings of despair and terror and anger and frustration, and things aren't working out the way I need them to, and gee, you know, why can't it be this way, or why doesn't, you know, this happen or that? And then I realized it is what it is, and embrace those things, accept them, accept the pain for what it is. I'm at a point in my recovery where I feel like, wow, when I surrendered my will to my higher power and I just went with the flow, all of a sudden all these magical things started happening. I would say the last 14 months were by far the most brutal time in my life, but also looking back now, it was one of the most beautiful times in my life. I remember staring at the moon. I had a very dear friend of mine that took me in over the summer last year, and I spent a lot of time up at Lake Geneva with her family and friends, and just looking at the stars and enjoying nature again and hearing music again where it was really great. Now I listen to music all the time. I hardly turn the TV on anymore because I listen to my favorite music. And I bought a motorcycle, which I love, and I just ride around and enjoy it so much. Sometimes I ride at 2 in the morning. Things I couldn't have done before. I can ride sober. I can make good, kind decisions with friends. If I get sad or I get scared or I get confused, I just stay to myself, which I couldn't do before. I would leave and go to one of my favorite watering holes or busy restaurants and bullshit with somebody for hours on end about nonsense. And now I just say, okay, today's a bad day, or these 2 days have been shitty, and I just stay home and I mind my own, or I go for a walk, or I just try and do something positive. And the magic, if you do the next right thing, which is sometimes the thing you want to do the least, magic starts to happen. And make it to a meeting. You know, when you talk about sober stories, I've heard hundreds now. And there's one common denominator. Everybody needs a support system. If you think you're going to stay sober, get sober, stay sober, and you're not going to make it to a meeting, or you're not going to have a support group, or you're not going to work the steps, or whatever program you're in, I only know the program that I'm in, and I believe that it works, is a support group. Being able to call 5 different people and tell them you're feeling not good. I've been blessed with so many great people in my life that have helped me talk through it. Or I just said, I've had so much, it took 35 years, but I had so much pain and suffering, and I lost so much that meant the world to me because of drinking, that as much as I would love to drink a glass of wine or have an ice cold Bud Light or an ice cold Amstel, I know that my life will spiral out of control, and it won't be 1, it'll be 10, like Jay's potato chips. And the next thing you know, I'll be some drunk guy sitting at the bar talking bullshit, waking up in the morning sick and wondering, why did I just give up how many ever days of sobriety that I had. If I could hold my dog, you know, one more time, or hug my ex-wife and tell her how sorry I am one more time. You know, right now, it's a day-to-day battle to just enjoy life, live in the moment, be grateful for what you have in the moment. Not what you want to have, not what you used to have, but what you have right now. And it's just the simplest things. A cupcake, or, you know, I'm conscious about taking care of myself. I'm careful about, you know, because it's the same thing with a tray of cookies in front of me. I'll eat 8 cookies, you know, when one person can just have maybe 2 Oreos. I got to have the whole bag. And so that manifests itself into problems with your health and, you know, the excess of whatever it is. So it's a blast, yeah, and not every day is a trip to Hollywood. But, you know, you can actually wake up in the morning and not go, where's my car? Or what did I say last night? Or where's my credit card? Or where's my cash? Or feel like you're going to throw up in the shower. It's awesome. And it's funny how much money starts to, you begin to save, because it's an expensive hobby. It's an expensive adventure. And all of a sudden, I know my bills are paid. I know that I'm responsible for everything. And stopping on the street and picking up a piece of trash instead of walking by it. Just those things like that I would have never done. I might have bitched about the trash, but I wouldn't pick it up. I'm not going to pick that up. And it becomes letting the guy go in front of you. He must be in a bigger hurry than me, and not getting out of the car and punching him in the face. Seemed like a good idea back in the day, but, you know, my poor wife, you know, the adventures she had to go on, you know, working on being kind all the time. It's very difficult for me to have patience sometimes. It's very difficult to stay in the moment, to not get, be humble. You're not the smartest guy in the room. You know, I like who I am now. Work on being my best friend. Not having to buy everybody in the bar or the restaurant dinner or drinks so they like me. I don't care anymore. It's, yeah, I want them to like me for me. I feel that I'm successful for the first time in my life at the biggest challenge I've ever faced. And for today, and I think with a lot of alcoholics, you want to fix, manage, and control other people. And one of the ways we do that is buying them things or somehow manipulating the situation. And I don't want to be that guy anymore. You know, I'd rather just walk away and go home or go sit somewhere or go for a ride or whatever it is than have to be the most popular guy at the tavern or this 6 taverns or wherever it is. You know, I know Joe. Oh, yeah, hey, Steve. Oh, yeah, hey, how you doing? What? Come on. Been there, done it. It's old. Now it's time to, yeah,